Section 32 of the Notebooks of Samuel Butler. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by 5-Pack. The Notebooks of Samuel Butler, edited by Henry Festing Jones. Chapter 24. The Life of the World to Come, Part 2. Worth doing. If I deserve to be remembered, it will not be so much for anything I have written, or for any new way of looking at old facts which I may have suggested, as for having shown that a man of no special ability, with no literary connections, not practically laborious, fairly but not supremely accurate as far as he goes, and not travelling far either for his facts or from them, may yet, by being perfectly square, sticking to his point, not letting his temper run away with him, and biding his time, be a match for the most powerful literary and scientific coterie that England has ever known. I hope it may be said of me that I discomfited an unscrupulous, self-seeking clique, and set a more wholesome example myself. To have done this is the best of all discoveries. Doubt and hope. I will not say that the more than coldness with which my books are received does not frighten me and make me distrust myself. It must do so, but every now and then I meet with such support as gives me hope again. Still, I know nothing. 1890. Unburying cities. Of course I am jealous of the eclat that Flinders, Petrie, Layard, and Schliemann get for having unburied cities, but I do not see why I need be. The great thing is to unbury the city, and I believe I have unburied Scheria as effectually as Schliemann unburied Troy, the authoress of the Odyssey. True, Scheria was above ground all the time, and only wanted a little common sense to find it. Nevertheless, people have had all the facts before them for over 2,500 years, and have been looking more or less all the time without finding. I do not see why it is more meritorious to uncover physically with a spade than spiritually with a little of the very commonest common sense. Apologia. 1. When I am dead, I would rather people thought me better than I was instead of worse. But if they think me worse, I cannot help it, and if it matters at all, it will matter more to them than to me. The one reputation I deprecate is that of having been ill-used. I deprecate this because it would tend to depress and discourage others from playing the game that I have played. I will therefore forestall misconception on this head. As regards general good fortune, I am nearly 55 years old, and for the last 30 years have never been laid up with illness nor had any physical pain that I can remember, not even toothache. Except sometimes when a little overdriven, I have had uninterrupted good health ever since I was about 25. Of mental suffering I have had my share, as who has not, but most of what I have suffered has been, though I did not think so at the time, either imaginary or unnecessary, and, so far, it has been soon forgotten. It has been much less than it very easily might have been, if the luck had not now and again gone with me, and probably I have suffered less than most people, take it all around. Like everyone else, however, I have the scars of old wounds. Very few of these wounds were caused by anything which was essential in the nature of things. Most, if not all, of them have been due to faults of heart and head on my own part, and on that of others which, one would have thought, might have been easily avoided if in practice it had not turned out otherwise. For many years I was in a good deal of money difficulty, but since my father's death I have had no trouble on this score, greatly otherwise. Even when things were at their worst, I never missed my 2 months' summer Italian trip since 1876, except 1 year, and then I went to Mont St. Michael and enjoyed it very much. It was those Italian trips that enabled me to weather the storm. At other times, I am engrossed with work that fascinates me. I am surrounded by people to whom I am attached, and who like me in return so far as I can judge. In Alfred, his clerk and attendant, I have the best bodyguard and the most engaging of any man in London. I live quietly but happily, and if this is being ill-used, I should like to know what being well-used is. I do not deny, however, that I have been ill-used. I have been used abominably. The positive amount of good or ill fortune, however, is not the test of either the one or the other. The true measure lies in the relative portion of each and the way in which they have been distributed, and by this I claim, after deducting all bad luck, to be left with a large balance of good. Some people think I must be depressed and discouraged because my books do not make more noise. But, after all, whether people read my books or no is their affair, not mine. I know by my sales that few read my books. If I write at all, it follows that I want to be read, and miss my mark if I am not. So also with Narcissus. Whatever I do falls dead, and I would rather people let me see that they liked it. To this extent I certainly am disappointed. I am sorry not to have wooed the public more successfully, but I have been told that winning and wearing generally takes something of the guilt off the wooing, and I am disposed to acquiesce cheerfully in not finding myself so received as that I need woo no longer. If I were to succeed, I should be bored to death by my success in a fortnight, and so, I am convinced, would my friends. Retirement is to me a condition of being able to work at all. I would rather write more books and music than spend much time over what I have already written. Nor do I see how I could get retirement if I were not to a certain extent unpopular. It is this feeling on my own part, omnipresent with me when I am doing my best to please, that is to say, whenever I write, which is the cause why I do not, as people say, get on. If I had greatly cared about getting on, I think I could have done so. I think I could even now write an anonymous book that would take the public as much as Erewhon did. Perhaps I could not, but I think I could. The reason why I do not try is because I like doing other things better. What I most enjoy is running the view of evolution set forth in Life and Habit, and making things less easy for the hacks of literature and science. Or perhaps even more, I enjoy taking snapshots and writing music, though aware that I had better not inquire whether this last is any good or not. In fact, there is nothing I do that I do not enjoy so keenly that I cannot tear myself away from it, and people who thus indulge themselves cannot have things both ways. I am so intent upon pleasing myself that I have no time to cater for the public. Some of them like things in the same way as I do. That class of people I try to please as well as ever I can. With others I have no concern, and they know it, so they have no concern with me. I do not believe there is any other explanation of my failure to get on than this, nor do I see that any further explanation is needed. 1890. 2. 2 or 3 people have asked me to return to the subject of my supposed failure and explain it more fully from my own point of view. I have had the subject on my notes for some time, and it has bored me so much that it has had a good deal with my not having kept my notebooks posted recently. Briefly, in order to scotch that snake, my failure has not been so great as people say it has. I believe my reputation stands well with the best people. Granted that it makes no noise, but I have not been willing to take the pains necessary to achieve what may be called guinea pig review success, because, although I have been in financial difficulties, I did not seriously need success from a money point of view, and because I hated the kind of people I should have had to court and kowtow to if I went in for that sort of thing. I could never have carried it through, even if I had tried, and instinctively declined to try. A man cannot be said to have failed because he did not get what he did not try for. What I did try for, I believe I have got as fully as any reasonable man can expect, and I have every hope that I shall get it still more both so long as I live and after I am dead. If, however, people mean that I am to explain how it is I have not made more noise in spite of my own indolence in matter, the answer is that those who do not either push themselves into noise or give someone else a substantial interest in pushing them never do get made a noise about. How can they? I was too lazy to go about from publisher to publisher and to decline to publish a book myself if I could not find someone to speculate in it. I could not take any amount of trouble about writing a book, but, so long as I could lay my hand on the money to bring it out with, I found publishers' antechambers so little to my taste that I soon tired and fell back on the short and easy method of publishing my book myself. Of course, therefore, it failed to sell. I know more about these things now and will never publish a book at my own risk again, or at any rate I will send somebody else round the antechambers with it for a good while before I pay for publishing it. I should have liked notoriety and financial success well enough if they could have been had for the asking, but I was not going to take any trouble about them, and, as a natural consequence, I did not get them. If I had wanted them with the same passionate longing that has led me to pursue every inquiry that I ever have pursued, I should have got them fast enough. It is very rarely that I have failed to get what I have really tried for, and, as a matter of fact, I believe I have been a great deal happier for not trying than I should have been if I had had notoriety thrust upon me. I confess I should like my books to pay their expenses, and put me a little in pocket besides, because I want to do more for Alfred than I see my way to doing. As a natural consequence of beginning to care, I have begun to take pains, and am advising the Society of Authors as to what will be my best course. Very likely they can do nothing for me, but at any rate I shall have tried. One reason, and that the chief, why I have made no noise is now explained. It remains to add that from first to last I have been unorthodox and militant in every book that I have written. I made enemies of the parsons once for all with my first two books, Erewhon and The Fair Haven. The evolution books made the Darwinians, and through them the scientific world in general, even more angry than The Fair Haven had made the clergy, so that I had no friends, for the clerical and scientific people rule the roost between them. I have chosen the fighting road, rather than the hang-on-to-a-great-man road. And what can a man who does this look for, except that people should try to silence him in whatever way they think will be most effectual? In my case, they have thought it best to pretend that I am non-existent. It is no part of my business to complain of my opponents for choosing their own line. My business is to defeat them as best I can upon their own line, and I imagine I shall do most towards this by not allowing myself to be made unhappy merely because I am not fussed about, and by going on writing more books and adding to my pile. My work. Why should I write about this, as though anyone will wish to read what I write? People sometimes give me to understand that it is a piece of ridiculous conceit on my part to jot down so many notes about myself, since it implies a confidence that I shall one day be regarded as an interesting person. I answer that neither I nor they can form any idea as to whether I shall be wanted when I am gone or no. The chances are that I shall not. I am quite aware of it. So the chances are that I shall not live to be 85, but I have no right to settle it so. If I do as Captain Don did, Life of Dr. Butler, 1, opening of chapter 8, and invest every penny I have in an annuity that shall terminate when I am 89, who knows but that I may live on to 96, as he did, and have 7 years without any income at all. I prefer the modest insurance of keeping up my notes, which others may burn or know as they please. I am not one of those who have travelled along a set road towards an end that I have foreseen and desired to reach. I have made a succession of jaunts or pleasure trips from meadow to meadow, but no long journey unless life itself be reckoned so. Nevertheless, I have strayed into no field in which I have not found a flower that was worth the finding. I have gone into no public place in which I have not found sovereigns lying about on the ground, which people would not notice and be at the trouble of picking up. They have been things which anyone else has had, or at any rate a very large number of people have had, as good a chance of picking up as I had. My finds have none of them come as the result of research or severe study, though they have generally given me plenty to do in the way of research and study as soon as I had got hold of them. I take it that these are the most interesting, or whatever the least offensive word may be. 1. The emphasizing the analogies between crime and disease, Erewhon. 2. The emphasizing also the analogies between the development of the organs of our bodies and of those which are not incorporate with our bodies, and which we call tools or machines, Erewhon, and luck or cunning. 3. The clearing up the history of the events in connection with the death, or rather crucifixion, of Jesus Christ, and a reasonable explanation, first, of the beliefs on the part of the founders of Christianity that their master had risen from the dead, and, secondly, of what might follow from belief in a single supposed miracle, the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus Christ, the Fair Haven, and Erewhon Revisited. 4. The perception that personal identity cannot be denied between parents and offspring without at the same time denying it as between the different ages, and hence moments, in the life of the individual, and, as a corollary on this, the ascription of the phenomena of heredity to the same source as those of memory, life, and habit. 5. The tidying up the earlier history of the theory of evolution old and new. 6. The exposure and discomfiture of Charles Darwin and Wallace and their followers, evolution old and new, unconscious memory, luck or cunning, and the deadlock in Darwinism in the Universal Review, republished in Essays on Life, Art, and Science. Footnote: Butler had two separate grounds of complaint against Charles Darwin, one scientific, the other personal. With regard to the personal quarrel, some facts came to light after Butler's death, and the subject is dealt with in a pamphlet entitled Charles Darwin and Samuel Butler, A Step Towards Reconciliation by Henry Festing Jones, A.C. Fifield, 1911. End footnote. 7. The perception of the principle that led organic life to split up into two main divisions, animal and vegetable. Alps and Sanctuaries, close of chapter 13. Luck or cunning. 8. The perception that if the kinetic theory is held good, our thought of a thing, whatever that thing may be, is in reality an exceedingly weak dilution of the actual thing itself. Stated, but not fully developed, in Luck or Cunning, chapter 19, also in some of the foregoing notes. 9. The restitution to Giovanni and Gentile Bellini of their portraits in the Louvre, and the finding of 5 other portraits of these two painters, of whom Crowe and Cavalcaselle and Layard maintain that we have no portrait. Letters to the Athenaeum, etc. 10. The restoration to Holbein of the drawing in the Basel Museum called La Danse. Universal Review, November 1889. 11. The calling attention to Gaudenzio Ferrari and putting him before the public with something like the emphasis that he deserves. Ex voto. 12. The discovery of a life-sized statue of Leonardo da Vinci by Gaudenzio Ferrari. Ex voto. 13. The unearthing of the Flemish sculpture Jean de Vespin, called Tabacchetti in Italy, and of Giovanni Antonio Paracca. Ex voto. 14. The finding out that the Odyssey was written at Trapani, the clearing up of the whole topography of the poem, and the demonstration, as it seems to me, that the poem was written by a woman and not by a man. Indeed, I may almost claim to have discovered the Odyssey, so altered does it become when my views of it are adopted. And robbing Homer of the Odyssey has rendered the Iliad far more intelligible. Besides, I have set the example of how he should be approached. The authoress of the Odyssey. 15. The attempt to do justice to my grandfather by writing the life and letters of Dr. Butler, for which, however, I had special faculties. 16. In Narcissus and Ulysses, I made an attempt, the failure of which has yet to be shown, to return to the principles of Handel and take them up where he left off. 17. The elucidation of Shakespeare's sonnets. Shakespeare's sonnets reconsidered. I say nothing here about my novel, The Way of All Flesh, because it cannot be published till after my death, nor about my translations of the Iliad and the Odyssey. Nevertheless, these 3 books also were a kind of picking up of sovereigns, for the novel contains records of things I saw happening, rather than imaginary incidences, and the principles on which the translations are made were obvious to anyone willing to take and use them. The foregoing is the list of my mare's nests, And it is, I presume, this list which made Mr. Arthur Platt call me the Galileo of Mare's Nest in his diatribe on my Odyssey theory in the Classical Review. I am not going to argue here that they are all, as I do not doubt, sound. What I want to say is that they are every one of them things that lay on the surface and open to any one else just as much as to me. Not one of them required any profundity of thought or extensive research. They only required that he who approached the various subjects with which they have to do should keep his eyes open and try to put himself in the position of various people whom they involve. Above all, it was necessary to approach them without any preconceived theory, and to be ready to throw over any conclusion the moment the evidence pointed against it. The reason why I have discarded so few theories that I have put forward, and at this moment I cannot recollect one from which there has been any serious attempt to dislodge me, is because I never allowed myself to form a theory at all till I found myself driven on to it, whether I would or no. As long as it was possible to resist, I resisted, and I only yielded when I could not think that an intelligent jury under capable guidance would go with me if I resisted longer. I never went in search of any one of my theories. I never knew what it was going to be till I had found it. They came and found me, not I them. Such being my own experience, I begin to be pretty certain that other people have had much the same, and that the soundest theories have come unsought and without much effort. The conclusion, then, of the whole matter is that scientific and literary fortunes are, like money fortunes, made more by saving than in any other way, more through the exercise of the common vulgar essentials, such as sobriety and straightforwardness, than by the more showy enterprises that, when they happen to succeed, are called genius, and when they fail, folly. The streets are full of sovereigns, crying aloud for someone to come and pick them up. Only the thick veil of our own insincerity and conceit hides them from us. He who can most tear this veil from in front of his eyes will be able to see most, and to walk off with them. I should say that the sooner I stop the better. If on my descent to the netherworld I were to be met and welcomed by the shades of those to whom I have done a good turn while I was here, I should be received by a fairly illustrious crowd. There would be Giovanni and Gentile Bellini, Leonardo da Vinci, Gaudenzio Ferrari, Holbein, Tabachetti, Paracca and De Enrico. The authoress of the Odyssey would come, and Homer with her. Dr. Butler would bring with him the many forgotten men and women to whom in my memoir I have given fresh life. There would be Buffon, Erasmus Darwin, and Lamarck. Shakespeare also would be there, and Handel. I could not wish to find myself in more congenial company, and I shall not take it too much to heart if the shade of Charles Darwin glides gloomily away when it sees me coming. End of section 32.
Section 33 of the Notebooks of Samuel Butler. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Elaine Conway, England. The Notebooks of Samuel Butler, edited by Henry Festing Jones. Chapter 25. Poems. Prefatory Note 1. Translation from an unpublished work of Herodotus. 2. The Shield of Achilles with variations. 3. The Two Deans. 4. On the Italian Priesthood. Butler wrote these 4 pieces while he was an undergraduate at St. John's College, Cambridge. He kept no copy of any of them, but his friend, the Reverend Canon Joseph McCormick, D.D., rector of St. James's, Piccadilly, kept copies in a notebook which he lent me. The only one that has appeared in print is The Shield of Achilles, which Canon McCormick sent the Eagle, the magazine of St. John's College, Cambridge, and it was printed in the number for December 1902, about 6 months after Butler's death. On the Italian priesthood is a rendering of the Italian epigram accompanying which, with others under the heading Astuzia Inganno, is given in Raccolta di Proverbi Toscani di Giuseppe Giusti, Firenze, 1853. 5. A Psalm of Montreal. This was written in Canada in 1875. Butler often recited it and gave copies of it to his friends. Knowing that Mr. Edward Clodd had had something to do with its appearance in the Spectator, I wrote asking him to tell me what he remembered about it. He very kindly replied, 29th of October 1905. The psalm was recited to me at the Century Club by Butler. He gave me a copy of it, which I read to the late Chas. Anderson, vicar of St. John's, Limehouse, who lent it to Matt. Arnold when inspecting Anderson's schools, who lent it to Richd Holt Hutton, who, with Butler's consent, printed it in the Spectator of 18th May 1878. The Psalm of Montreal was included in selections from previous works, 1884, and in 7 sonnets, etc. 6. The Righteous Man. Butler wrote this in 1876. It has appeared before only in 1879 in the Examiner, where it formed part of the correspondence. A clergyman's doubts, of which the letter signed Ethics has already been given in this volume. See page 304, ante. The Righteous Man was signed XYZ, and, in order to connect it with a discussion, Butler prefaced it with a note comparing it to the last 6 inches of a line of railway. There is no part of the road so ugly, so little travelled over, or so useless generally, but it is the end, at any rate, of a very long thing. 7. To Critics and Others. This was written in 1883 and has not hitherto been published. 8. For Narcissus. These are printed for the first time. The pianoforte score of Narcissus was published in 1888. The poem A was written because there was some discussion then going on in musical circles about additional accompaniments to the Messiah, and we did not want any to be written for Narcissus. The poem B shows how Butler originally intended to open Part 2 with a kind of descriptive programme, but he changed his mind and did it differently. 9. A translation attempted in consequence of a challenge. This translation into Homeric verse of a famous passage from Martin Chuzzlewit was a by-product of Butler's work on the Odyssey and the Iliad. It was published in the Eagle in March 1894 and was included in 7 sonnets. I asked Butler, who had challenged him, to attempt the translation, and he replied that he had thought of that and had settled that. If anyone else were to ask the question, he should reply that the challenge came from me. 10. Memoriam H.R.F. This appears in print now for the first time. Hans Rudolf Fiesch, a young Swiss from Basel, came to London in the autumn of 1893. He spent much of his time with us until 14th of February 1895, where he left for Singapore. We saw him off from Holborn Viaduct Station. He was not well, and it was a stormy night. The next day Butler wrote this poem and, being persuaded that we should never see Hans Fiesch again, called it an memoriam. Hans did not die on the journey. He arrived safely in Singapore and settled in the East, where he carried on business. We exchanged letters with him frequently. He paid 2 visits to Europe, and we saw him on both occasions, but he did not live long. He died in the autumn of 1903 at Vientiane in the Shan States, aged 32, having survived Butler by about a year and a half. 11. An academic exercise. This has never been printed before. It is a farewell, and that is why I have placed it next after the In Memoriam. The contrast between the 2 poems illustrates the contrast pointed out at the close of the note on the dislike of death, ante, page 359. The memory of a love that has been cut short by death remains still fragrant, though enfeebled, but no recollection of its past can sweep sweeter love that has dried up and withered through accidents of time and life. In the ordinary course, Butler would have talked this sonnet over with me at the time he wrote it, that is, in January 1902. He may even have done so, but I think not. From the 2nd of January 1902 until late in March, when he left London alone for Sicily, I was ill with pneumonia, and remember very little of what happened then. Between his return in May and his death in June, I am sure he did not mention the subject. Knowing the facts that underlie the preceding poem, I can tell why Butler called it an in memoriam. Not knowing the facts that underlie this poem, I cannot tell why Butler should have called it an academic exercise. It is his last sonnet, and is dated Sunday, January the 12th, 1902. Within 6 months of his death, at a time when he was depressed physically because his health was failing, and mentally because he had been editing his remains, reading and destroying old letters and brooding over the past. One of the subjects given in the section, Titles and Subjects, ante, is the diseases and ordinary causes of mortality among friendships. I suppose that he found among his letters something which awakened memories of a friendship of his earlier life. A friendship that had suffered from a disease, whether it recovered or died, would not affect the sincerity of the emotions experienced by Butler at the time. He believed the friendship to be virtually dead. I suppose the sonnet to be an in memoriam upon the apprehended death of a friendship, as the preceding poem is an in memoriam upon the apprehended death of a friend. This may be wrong, but something of the kind seems necessary to explain why Butler should have called the sonnet an academic exercise. No one who has read Shakespeare's sonnets reconsidered will require to be told that he disagreed contemptuously with those critics who believe that Shakespeare composed his sonnets as academic exercises. It is certain that he wrote this as he wrote his other sonnets in imitation of Shakespeare, not merely imitating the form, but approaching the subject in the spirit in which he believed Shakespeare to have approached his subject. It follows, therefore, that he did not write this sonnet as an academic exercise. Had he done so, he would not have been imitating Shakespeare. If we assume that he was presenting his story, as he presented the dialogue in A Psalm of Montreal, in a form perhaps true, perhaps imaginary, perhaps a little of the one and a little of the other, it would be quite in the manner of the author of The Fair Haven to burlesque the methods of the critics by ignoring the sincerity of the emotions and fixing on the little bit of inaccuracy in the facts. We may suppose him to be saying out loud to the critics, "You think Shakespeare's sonnets were composed as academic exercises, do you? Very well then, now what do you make of this?" And adding aside to himself, "That would be good enough for them. They'll swallow anything." 12. A Prayer. Extract from Butler's Notebooks under the date of February or March 1883. Cleanse thou me from my secret sins. I heard a man moralizing on this, and shocked him by saying demurely that I did not mind these so much if I could get rid of those that were obvious to other people. He wrote the sonnet in 1900 or 1901. In the first quatrain, spoken does not rhyme with open. Butler knew this and would not alter it because there are similar assonances in Shakespeare, e.g. open and broken in sonnet LX1. 13. Comma. I am responsible for grouping these 3 sonnets under this heading. The second one, beginning "What is't to live?" appears in Butler's notebook, with the remark, "This wants much tinkering, but I cannot tinker it," meaning that he was too occupied with other things. He left the second line of the third of these sonnets thus: "Them palpable to touch and view." I have tinkered it by adding the 2 syllables "and clear" to make the line complete. In writing this sonnet, Butler was no doubt thinking of a note he made in 1891. It is often said that there is no bore like a clever bore. Clever people are always bores and always must be. That is, perhaps, why Shakespeare had to leave London. People could not stand him any longer. 14. The Life After Death. Butler began to write sonnets in 1898, when he was studying those of Shakespeare, on which he published a book in the following year, Shakespeare's Sonnets Reconsidered, and c. He had gone to Flushing by himself, and on his return wrote to me, 24th of August, 1898. Also at Flushing I wrote one myself, a poor innocent thing, but I was surprised to find how easy it came. If you like it, I may write a few more. The poor innocent thing was a sonnet beginning, not on sad Stygian shore. The first of those I have grouped under the heading The Life After Death. It appears in his notebooks with this introductory sentence: Having now learned Shakespeare's sonnets by heart, and there are very few which I do not find I understand the better for having done this, on Saturday night last at the Hotel Zealand at Flushing, finding myself in a meditative mood, I wrote the following with a good deal less trouble than I anticipated when I took pen and paper in hand. I hope I may improve it. Of course I liked the sonnet very much, and he did write a few more, among them the two on Handel which I have put after Not on Sad Stygian Shore, because he intended that they should follow it. I am sure he would have wished this volume to close with these 3 sonnets, especially because the last 2 of them were inspired by Handel, who was never absent from his thoughts for long. Let me conclude these introductory remarks by reproducing a note made in 1883. Of all dead men, Handel has had the largest place in my thoughts. In fact, I should say that he and his music have been the central fact in my life, ever since I was old enough to know of the existence of either life or music. All day long, whether I am writing or painting or walking, but always I have his music in my head. And if I lose sight of it and of him for an hour or 2, as of course I sometimes do, this is as much as I do. I believe I am not exaggerating when I say that I have never been a day since I was 13 without having Handel in my mind many times over. 1. Translation from an unpublished work of Herodotus. And the Jonians practise their tub in the following manner. They select 8 of the most serviceable freshmen and put these into a boat. To each one of them they give an oar, and having told them to look at the backs of the men before them, they make them bend forward as far as they can, and at the same moment, and, having put the end of the oar into the water, pull it back again into them about the bottom of the ribs, and if any of them does not do this or looks about them away from the back of the man before him, they curse him in the most terrible manner. But if he does what he is bidden, they immediately cry out, "Well pulled, number so and so," for they do not call them by their names, but by certain numbers, each man of them having a number allotted to him in accordance with his place in the boat, and the first man they call Stroke, the last man Bow. And when they have done this for about 50 miles, they come home again, and the rate they travel at is about 25 miles an hour. And let no one think that this is too great a rate, for I would say many other wonderful things in addition concerning the rowing of the Jonians. But if a man wishes to know these things, he must go and examine them himself. But when they have done they contrive some such a device as this, for they make them run many miles along the side of the river, in order that they may accustom them to great fatigue, and many of them being distressed in this way, fall down and die. But those who survive become very strong, and receive gifts of cups from the others, and after the revolution of a year they have great races with their boats against those of the surrounding islanders. But the Jonians, both owing to the carefulness of the training and a natural disposition for rowing, are always victorious. In this way, then, the Jonians, I say, practise their tub. 2. The Shield of Achilles with variations. And in it he placed the Fitzwilliam and King's College Chapel, and the lofty towered church of the great St. Mary, which looketh towards the Senate House, and King's Parade, and Trumpington Road, and the Pit Press, and the divine opening of the Market Square, and the beautiful flowing fountain, which formerly Hobson laboured to make with skilful art. Him did his father beget in the many public house Trumpington, from a slavey mother and taught him blameless works, and he, on the other hand, sprang up like a young shoot, and many beautifully matched horses did he nourish in his stable, which used to convey his rich possessions to London and the various cities of the world. But oftentimes did he let them out to others, and whensoever any one was desirous of hiring one of the long-tailed horses, he took them in order, so that the labour was equal to all. Wherefore do men now speak of the choice of the renowned Hobson, and in it he placed the close of the divine Parker, and many beautiful undergraduates were delighting their tender minds upon it playing cricket with one another, and a match was being played, and two umpires were quarrelling with one another, the one saying that the batsman who was playing with was out, and the other declaring with all his might that he was not. And while they two were contending, reviling one another with abusive language, the ball came and hit one of them on the nose, and the blood flowed out in a stream, and darkness was covering his eyes. But the rest were crying out on all sides, "Shy it up!" and he could not. Him, then, was his companion addressing with scornful words. "Arnold, why dost thou strive with me since I am much wiser? Did not I see his leg before the wicket, and rightly declare him to be out? 3. Thee, then, has use now punished according to thy deserts, and I will speak some other umpire of the game equally participated in by both sides." And in it he placed the camp, and many boats equally rowed on both sides, were going up and down on the bosom of the deep rolling river, and the coxswains were cheering on the men, for they were going to enter the contest of the Scratchian Falls, and 3 men were rowing together in a boat, strong and stout, and determined in their hearts that they would either first break a blood vessel, or earn for themselves the electro-plated, Birmingham manufactured magnificence of a pewter to stand on their ball tables in memorial of their strength, and from time to time drink from it the exhilarating streams of beer whensoever their dear heart should compel them. But the 4th was weak and unequally matched with the others, and the coxswain was encouraging him, and called him by name, and spake cheering words: "Smith, when thou hast begun the contest, be not flurried, nor strive too hard against thy fate. Look at the back of the man before thee, and row with as much strength as the fates spun out for thee on the day when thou fellest between the knees of thy mother. Neither lose thine oar, but hold it tight with thy hands." 3. The Two Deans. Scene: the court of St. John's College, Cambridge. Enter the 2 Deans on their way to morning chapel. Junior Dean: Brother, I am much pleased with Samuel Butler. I have observed him mightily of late. Methinks that in his melancholy walk, and air subdued whene'er he meeteth me, lurks something more than in most other men. Senior Dean: It is a good young man. I do bethink me that once I walked behind him in the cloister. He saw me not, but whispered to his fellow, "Of all men who do dwell beneath the moon, I love and reverence most the Senior Dean." Junior Dean: One thing is passing strange, and yet I know not how to condemn it. But in one plain brief word, he never comes to Sunday morning chapel. Methinks he teacheth in some Sunday school, feeding the poor and starveling intellect with wholesome knowledge, or on the Sabbath morn he loves the country and the neighbouring spire of Madingley or Cotton, or perchance amid some humble poor he spends the day conversing with them, learning all their cares, comforting them, and easing them in sickness. Oh, 'tis a rare young man. Senior Dean: I will advance him to some public post. He shall be chapel clerk, some day a fellow, some day perhaps a dean. But as thou sayest, he is indeed an excellent young man. Enter Butler suddenly without a coat, or anything on his head, rushing through the cloisters, bearing a cup, a bottle of cider, 4 lemons, 2 nutmegs, half a pound of sugar, and a nutmeg grater. Curtain falls on the confusion of Butler and the horror-stricken dismay of the 2 Deans. 4. On the Italian priesthood. Con arte e con inganno si vive mezzo l'anno, con inganno e con arte, si vivi l'altra parte. In knavish art and gathering gear, they spend the one half of the year. In gathering gear and knavish art, they somehow spend the other part. 5. Psalm of Montreal. The city of Montreal is one of the most rising and, in many respects, most agreeable on the American continent, but its inhabitants are as yet too busy with commerce to care greatly about the masterpieces of old Greek art. In the Montreal Museum of Natural History I came upon 2 plaster casts, one of the Antinous and the other of the Discobolus. Not the good one, but in my poem, of course, I intend the good one. Banished from public view to a room were all manner of skins, plants, snakes, insects, etc., and in the middle of these an old man stuffing an owl. "Ah," said I, "so you have some antiques here. Why don't you put them where people can see them?" "Well, sir," answered the custodian, "you see they are rather vulgar." He then talked a great deal, and said his brother did all Mr. Spurgeon's printing. The dialogue, perhaps true, perhaps imaginary, perhaps a little of the one and a little of the other, between the writer and this old man, gave rise to the lines that follow. Stowed away in a Montreal lumber room, the Discobolus standeth, and turneth his face to the wall, dusty, cobweb covered, maimed and set at naught. Beauty crieth in an attic, and no man regardeth. O God, O Montreal! Beautiful by night and day, beautiful in summer and winter, whole or maimed, always and alike beautiful. He preacheth gospel of grace to the skin of owls, and to one who seasoneth the skins of Canadian owls. O God, O Montreal! When I saw him I was wroth, and I said, O Discobolus, beautiful Discobolus, a prince both among gods and men, what doest thou here? How camest thou hither, Discobolus, preaching gospel in vain to the skins of owls? O God, O Montreal! And I turned to the man of skins, and said unto him, O thou man of skins, wherefore hast thou done thus to shame the beauty of the Discobolus? But the Lord had hardened the heart of the man of skins, and he answered, My brother-in-law is haberdasher to Mr. Spurgeon. O God, O Montreal! The Discobolus is put here because he is vulgar. He has neither vest nor pants with which to cover his limbs. I, sir, am a person of most respectable connections. My brother-in-law is haberdasher to Mr. Spurgeon. O God, O Montreal! Then I said, O brother-in-law to Mr. Spurgeon's haberdasher, who seasonest also the skins of Canadian owls. Thou callest trousers pants, whereas I call them trousers. Therefore thou art in hell fire, and may the Lord pity thee. O God, O Montreal! Preferest thou the gospel of Montreal to the gospel of Hellas, the gospel of thy connection with Mr. Spurgeon's haberdashery to the gospel of the Discobolus? Yet none the less blasphemed he beauty, saying, The Discobolus hath no gospel, but my brother-in-law is haberdasher to Mr. Spurgeon. O God, O Montreal! 6. The Righteous Man. The righteous man will rob none but the defenceless. Whatsoever can reckon with him, he will neither plunder nor kill. He will steal an egg from a hen, or a lamb from an ewe, for his sheep and his hens cannot reckon with him hereafter. They live not in any colour of defencefulness. Therefore right is with the righteous man, and he taketh advantage righteously, praising God and plundering. The righteous man will enslave his horse and his dog, making them serve him for their bare keep and for nothing further, shooting them, selling them for vivisection when they can no longer profit him, backbiting them and beating them if they fail to please him, for his horse and his dog can bring no action for damages. Wherefore then should he not enslave them, shoot them, sell them for vivisection? But the righteous man will not plunder the defenceful, nor not if he be alone and unarmed, for his conscience will smite him. He will not rob a shabir of her cubs, nor an eagle of her eaglets, unless he have a rifle to purge him from the fear of sin. Then may he shoot, rejoicing in innocency, from ambush or a safe distance. Or he will beguile them, lay poison for them, keep no faith with them. For what faith is there with that which cannot reckon hereafter, neither by itself, nor by another, nor by any residuum of ill consequences? Surely, where weakness is utter, honour ceaseth. Nay, I will do what is right in the eye of him who can harm me, and not in those of him who cannot call me to account. Therefore yield me up thy pretty wings, O humming bird. Sing for me in a prison, O lark. Pay me thy rent, O widow, for it is mine. Where there is reckoning, there is sin, and where there is no reckoning, sin is not. 7. To critics and others. O critics, cultured critics, who will praise me after I am dead, who will see in me both more and less than I intended, but who will swear that whatever it was all perfectly right. You will think you are better than the people who, when I was alive, swore that whatever I did was wrong, and damned my books for me as fast as I could write them. But you will not be better, you will be just the same, neither better nor worse, and you will go for some future Butler as your fathers have gone for me. Oh, how I should have hated you! But you, nice people, who will be sick of me because the critics thrust me down your throats, but who would take me willingly enough if you were not bored about me, or if you could have the cream of me, and surely this would suffice. Please remember that if I were living I should be upon your side, and should hate those who impose me either on myself or others. Therefore I pray you, neglect me, burlesque me, pull me down, do whatever you like with me, but do not think that if I were living I should not aid and abet you. There is nothing that even Shakespeare would enjoy more than a good burlesque of Hamlet. 8. For Narcissus. A. To be written in front of the orchestral score. May he be damned for evermore who tampers with Narcissus's score. May he by poisonous snakes be bitten who writes more parts than what we've written. We've tried to make our music clear for those who sing and those who hear, not lost and muddled up and drowned in overdone orchestral sound. So kindly leave the work alone, or do it as we want it done. B. Part 2. Symphony, during which the audience is requested to think as follows. An aged lady taken ill desires to reconstruct her will. I see the servants hurrying for the family solicitor. Post haste he comes, and with him brings the usual necessary things. With common form and driving quill he draws the first part of the will. The more sonorous solemn sounds denote £100,000. This trifle is the main bequest. Old friends and servants take the rest. 'Tis done. I see her sign her name. I see the attestors do the same. Who is the happy legatee? In the next number you will see. 9. A translation, attempted in consequence of a challenge. Mrs. Harris, I says to her, don't name the charge, for if I could afford to lay all my feller creeturs out for nothink, I would gladly do it. Sich is the love I bear 'em. But what I always says to them, as has the management of matters, Mrs. Harris, here she kept her eye on Mr. Pecksniff, be thy gents or be thy ladies, is, don't ask me whether I won't take none, or whether I will, but leave the bottle on the chimley piece, and let me put my lips to it when I am so disposed. Martin Chuzzlewit, Chapter 19. 10. In Memoriam, February the 14th, 1895. To H.R.F. Out, out, out into the night, with the wind bitter north-east, and the sea rough. You have a racking cough, and your lungs are weak. But out, out into the night you go. So guide you and guard you heaven, and fare you well. We have been 3 lights to one another, and now we are 2. For you go far and alone into the darkness, but the light in you was stronger and clearer than ours, for you came straighter from God, whereas we had learned, you had never forgotten. 3 minutes more, and then out, out into the night you go. So guide you and guard you heaven, and fare you well. Never a cross look, never a thought, never a word that had better been left unspoken. We gave you the best we had, such as it was. It pleased you well, for you smiled and nodded your head. And now out, out into the night you go. So guide you and guard you heaven, and fare you well. You said we were a little weak, that the three of us wept. Are we then weak if we laugh when we are glad? When men are under the knife, let them roar as they will, so that they flinch not. Therefore let tears flow on, for so long as we live, no such second sorrow shall ever draw nigh us, till one of us two leaves the other alone, and goes out, out, out into the night. So guard the one that is left, O God, and fare him well. Yet for the great bitterness of this grief, we three, you and he and I, may pass into the hearts of like true comrades hereafter, in whom we may weep anew, and yet comfort them as they too pass out, out, out into the night. So guide them and guard them heaven, and fare them well. The minutes have flown, and he whom we loved is gone, the like of whom we never again shall see. The wind is heavy with snow, and the sea rough. He has a racking cough, and his lungs are weak. Hand in hand we watch the train as it glides out, out, out into the night. So take him into thy holy keeping, O Lord, and guide him and guard him ever, and fare him well. 11. An academic exercise. We were two lovers standing sadly by, while our two loves lay dead upon the ground. Each love had striven not to be first to die, but each was gashed with many a cruel wound. Said I, your love was false while mine was true. Aflood with tears he cried, it was not so. 'Twas your false love my true love falsely slew. For 'twas your love that was the first to go. Thus did we stand and said no more for shame, till I, seeing his cheek so wan and wet, sobbed thus, so be it, my love shall bear the blame. Let us inter them honourably, and yet I swear by all truth, human and divine, 'twas his that in its death throes murdered mine. 12. A prayer. Searchers of souls, you who in heaven abide, to whom the secrets of all hearts are open, though I do lie to all the world beside, for me to these no falsehood shall be spoken. Cleanse me not, Lord, I say, from secret sin, but from those faults which he who runs can see. 'Tis these that torture me, O Lord. Begin with these, and let the hidden vices be. If you must cleanse these too, at any rate, deal with the seen sins first. 'Tis only reason, they being so gross, to let the others wait the leisure of some more convenient season. And cleanse not all even then, leave me a few. I would not be, not quite, so pure as you. 13. Karma. A. Who paints a picture, writes a play or book, which others read while he's asleep in bed? Oh, the other side of the world! When they o'erlook his page, the sleeper might as well be dead. What knows he of his distant, unfelt life? What knows he of the thoughts his thoughts are raising, the life his life is giving, or the strife concerning him, some cavilling, some praising? Yet which is most alive, he who's asleep, or his quick spirit in some other place, or score of other places, that doth keep attention fixed, and sleep from others chase? Which is the he that sleeps, or he that his own he can neither feel nor see? B. What is't to live, if not to pull the strings of thought that pull those grosser strings whereby we pull our limbs to pull material things into such shape as in our thoughts doth lie? Who pulls the strings that pull an agent's hand, the actions counted his, so, we being gone, the deeds that others do by our command, albeit we know them not as still our own? He lives who does, and he who does still lives, whether he wots of his own deeds or no. Who knows the beating of his heart that drives blood to each part, or how his limbs did grow? If life be naught but knowing, then each breath we draw unheeded must be reckoned death. C. Men's work we have, quoth one, but we want them, palpable to touch and clear to view. Is it so nothing then to have the gem, but we must weep to have the setting too? Body is a chest, wherein the tools abide, with which the craftsman works as best he can, and, as the chest the tools within doth hide, so doth the body crib and hide the man. Nay, though great Shakespeare stood in flesh before us, should Heaven on opportunity release him, is it so certain that he might not bore us, so sure but we ourselves might fail to please him? Who prays to have the moon full soon, would pray, once it were his, to have it taken away. 14. The life after death. A. Not on sad Stygian shore, nor in clear sheen, or far Elysian plain, shall we meet those among the dead whose pupils we have been, nor those great shades whom we have held as foes. No meadow of asphodel our feet shall tread, nor shall we look each other in the face, to love or hate each other being dead, hoping some praise, or fearing some disgrace. We shall not argue saying 'twas thus, or thus. Our arguments' whole drift we shall forget. Who's right, who's wrong, 'twill be all one to us. We shall not even know that we have met, yet meet we shall, and part and meet again, where dead men meet on lips of living men. B. Handel. Here doth great Handel live, imperious still, invisible and impalpable as air, but forcing flesh and blood to work his will effectually, as though his flesh were there. He who gave eyes to ears and showed in sound all thoughts and things in earth or heaven above, from fire and hailstones running along the ground, to Galatea grieving for her love. He who could show to all unseeing eyes glad shepherds watching o'er their flocks by night, or Iphis angel wafted to the skies, or Jordan standing as an heap upright, he'll meet both Jones and me, and clap or hiss us vicariously for having writ Narcissus. C. Handel. Father of my poor music, if such small offspring as mine, so born out of due time, so scorned, can be called fatherful at all, or dare to thy high sonship's rank to climb, best loved of all the dead whom I love best, though I love many another dearly too, you in my heart take rank above the rest. King of those kings that most control me, you are about my path, about my bed in boyhood, always and where'er I be, whate'er I think or do, you in my head, ground bast to all my thoughts, are still with me. Methinks the very worms will find some strain of yours still lingering in my wasted brain. End of section 33. End of the Notebooks of Samuel Butler, edited by Henry Festing Jones.